The blood-soaked bandage around Thea Kinsley's wrist told a story that nobody in Cottonwood Creek believed, her trembling voice drowned out by the whispers that followed her like shadows through the dusty streets of the frontier town. It was the summer of 1878, and Cottonwood Creek, Arizona Territory, stood as a testament to humanity's stubborn desire to build civilization in the harshest of landscapes. The town had sprung up 5 years prior when silver was discovered in the nearby hills, bringing with it saloons, a general store, and people seeking fortune in the unforgiving desert. Thea had arrived in town just 3 months ago, taking a position as the schoolteacher after the previous one had succumbed to tuberculosis. At 22, she was educated, proper, and entirely unprepared for the rugged reality of frontier life. Her porcelain skin hadn't yet weathered under the relentless sun, and her honey-brown hair remained neatly pinned despite the dust that seemed to coat everything else. That morning, she'd stumbled into Doc Parsons' office, her sleeve soaked crimson, claiming she'd been attacked in her small cabin at the edge of town by a man whose face she couldn't clearly see in the darkness. The doctor had stitched her wound 3 deep gashes that looked suspiciously like claw marks, while Sheriff Boyd Howell stood in the doorway, his weathered face a mask of skepticism. "Miss Kinsley," he'd said, twirling his mustache, "you're saying a man broke into your home, slashed your arm, then disappeared without taking anything, or—" His implication hung in the air. "That's exactly what happened," Thea had insisted, her voice wavering but determined. "I woke to a noise, and he was standing over my bed. I screamed, and he attacked me before fleeing through the window." The sheriff had merely nodded, but his eyes told a different story. By noon, the rumors had already spread through town that the new schoolteacher had likely hurt herself for attention, or perhaps to cover up some indiscretion. Some whispered she was unstable. Why else would a proper young lady come all the way to the Arizona Territory alone? Now, as the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the wooden boardwalks of Cottonwood Creek, Thea made her way to the general store, ignoring the stares and hushed conversations that stopped abruptly as she passed. Her arm throbbed beneath the bandage, a constant reminder of the terror she'd felt in the dark hours before dawn. The bell above the door jingled as she entered Whitaker's general store. Mrs. Whitaker, a stout woman with gray-streaked hair, glanced up from her ledger, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Whitaker," Thea said with forced brightness. "I need some kerosene for my lamp, please." "Of course," Mrs. Whitaker replied coolly, moving toward the back of the store. "Planning to stay up late again, are you?" The implication was clear. Thea swallowed her retort and focused on the list in her hand. She needed supplies, not just kerosene, but a stronger lock for her door and window latches that couldn't be easily jimmied open from the outside. The bell jingled again, and Thea turned to see a man she didn't recognize enter the store. He was tall, with broad shoulders and sun-bronzed skin that spoke of years under the open sky. His clothes were trail-worn, but clean denim pants, a faded blue shirt, and a vest that had seen better days. The Colt revolver on his hip was well-maintained, the wooden grip smooth from years of handling. His hat, a wide-brimmed Stetson, shadowed his features as he nodded a greeting to Mrs. Whitaker. "Afternoon, madam. Just rode in. Need some supplies before heading out again." His voice was deep and smooth, like aged whiskey. When he removed his hat, Thea saw that his hair was the color of wet sand, and his eyes, when they briefly met hers, were a startling green. A thin scar ran along his jawline, disappearing into the stubble that covered his face. "Welcome to Cottonwood Creek, mister," Mrs. Whitaker said, suddenly much more pleasant than she'd been moments ago. "Thornton, Ethan Thornton," he replied, setting his hat on the counter. "Just passing through on my way to Tucson." Thea turned away, focusing on the shelf of canned goods. She was accustomed to being invisible now, and she preferred it to the alternative being the subject of cruel speculation. "You'll want to stay at the Silverado, then," Mrs. Whitaker continued, gesturing toward the window, where the saloon and hotel was visible across the street. "Clean rooms, fair prices." Ethan nodded, then his gaze fell on Thea again, this time noticing the bandage on her arm. "Madam," he said, addressing her directly. "You're hurt." Thea stiffened, clutching her list tighter. "It's nothing serious." Mrs. Whitaker snorted softly. "Our schoolteacher had quite the tale to tell this morning. Claims someone attacked her in the night." "It wasn't a tale," Thea replied, her voice quiet but firm. "And I'd appreciate if you'd simply fill my order, Mrs. Whitaker." The older woman's lips pursed again, and she moved to gather Thea's requested items. Ethan Thornton watched the exchange with interest, his expression unreadable. "New in town?" he asked Thea. 3 months, she replied, not meeting his eyes. "From back east, I'd wager." Despite herself, Thea smiled slightly. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's spent enough time out west to spot the difference," he said, a hint of warmth in his voice. "Where's home?" "Boston, or it was." Mrs. Whitaker returned with Thea's kerosene. "That'll be 45 cents, Miss Kinsley." Thea counted out the coins, painfully aware of how few remained in her small purse. Teaching paid little, and she'd spent much of her savings just getting to Arizona. "And the window latches?" she asked. Mrs. Whitaker frowned. "Mr. Whitaker hasn't received that shipment yet. Maybe next month." Thea's heart sank. A month with nothing but a flimsy latch between her and whoever had attacked her was unthinkable. "I see," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Thank you anyway." As she gathered her purchases, Ethan Thornton spoke up again. "I'm handy with tools. If you're concerned about your windows, I might be able to rig something up temporarily." Mrs. Whitaker's eyebrows shot up, and Thea felt her cheeks flush. A strange man offering assistance would only add fuel to the gossip. "Thank you, Mr. Thornton. But that won't be necessary," she said quickly. "Good day?" She hurried out of the store, feeling his eyes on her back as she went. Outside, the heat hit her like a physical force, and she paused to catch her breath, adjusting the package under her arm. "Miss Kinsley!" She turned to see Sheriff Howell approaching, his thumbs hooked in his belt. His gray mustache twitched as he smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. "Sheriff!" she acknowledged, bracing herself. "I've been asking around about your incident," he said, keeping his voice low. "Nobody saw or heard anything unusual last night. Not even Mrs. Dempsey next door to you, and that woman hears everything." "It happened, Sheriff," Thea insisted. "I'm not making this up." Sheriff Howell sighed. "Look, Miss Kinsley, I understand coming out west can be difficult for a young lady. Loneliness, fear they can play tricks on the mind. Are you suggesting I wounded myself?" Thea asked incredulously. The sheriff shrugged. "I'm suggesting that perhaps what happened isn't exactly as you remember it. Maybe you had a nightmare, became disoriented in the dark, and injured yourself accidentally." Thea's fingers tightened around her package. "The man was real, Sheriff, and so was his knife. Those wounds," the sheriff said carefully, "don't look like knife wounds to me. Doc Parsons agrees. They look more like, well, like you got tangled up in something with claws. A wild animal, maybe." "In my bedroom?" Thea couldn't keep the exasperation from her voice. "It's more likely than what you're suggesting," the sheriff replied. "Now, I've got a town to look after, Miss Kinsley. I can't be chasing shadows based on a story that doesn't add up." He tipped his hat and walked away, leaving Thea standing alone, humiliation burning in her chest. She turned toward her small cabin at the edge of town, fighting back tears. She wouldn't cry, not here in the street where everyone could see. The walk to her cabin was mercifully short. It was a simple one-room structure with a small porch, set slightly apart from the other buildings. Inside, it was neat and spare a bed, a table with 2 chairs, a small stove, and a washstand. Books were her one indulgence, stacked carefully on a shelf she'd constructed herself. Thea set down her package and moved to the window, examining the simple latch that had been forced open the night before. The wood around it was splintered, evidence of the intrusion that the sheriff refused to acknowledge. She sighed, pressing her forehead against the glass. Perhaps she should leave Cottonwood Creek, return east, admit defeat. But the thought of facing her family's disapproval was almost worse than staying here amid the whispers and disbelief. A knock at her door startled her from her thoughts. Her heart raced as she approached it cautiously. "Who is it?" she called. "Ethan Thornton, madam, from the store." Thea hesitated, then opened the door a crack. The cowboy stood on her porch, hat in hand, looking somewhat apologetic. "I apologize for following you," he said, "but I couldn't help overhearing your conversation with the sheriff." Thea stiffened. "Have you come to tell me I'm imagining things as well, Mr. Thornton?" "No, madam. I've come to offer my help." "May I?" He gestured to the door. Against her better judgment, Thea opened it wider, allowing him inside. She left the door open, though no need to give the gossips more ammunition. Ethan looked around the cabin, taking in the sparse furnishings and the broken window latch. "You live here alone?" "Yes," Thea replied, standing near the door. "I teach at the school." He moved to the window, examining the damaged wood. "Someone definitely forced this open. Recently, too, the splinters are still fresh." A rush of vindication swept through Thea. "You believe me?" Ethan turned to face her, his expression serious. "I've got no reason not to, Miss Kinsley. Mind telling me exactly what happened?" Thea hesitated, then gestured to one of the chairs. "Please sit. Would you like some coffee?" "That would be mighty kind," he replied, settling into the chair. As she busied herself with the coffee pot, Thea found herself telling this stranger what had happened, how she'd awakened to find a figure looming over her bed, how she'd screamed, and the man had lunged at her, slashing at her arm as she raised it to defend herself, how he'd fled through the window when she continued screaming, and how she'd huddled in terror until dawn, when she'd gone straight to the doctor. "I didn't get a good look at his face," she concluded, setting a cup of coffee before him. "It was too dark, and he moved too quickly. But he was real, Mr. Thornton, as real as you sitting there." Ethan sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "And no one believes you?" "No one," Thea confirmed, sitting across from him. "They think I'm either lying for attention or that I've lost my mind." "Why would anyone think that?" Thea's laugh was bitter. "Because I'm a woman alone on the frontier? Because I'm not from here? Take your pick, Mr. Thornton." "Call me Ethan," he said. "And for what it's worth, I believe you, Miss Kinsley." "Thea," she offered in return, surprising herself. "And thank you. That means more than you know." Ethan's smile was warm, transforming his weathered face. "Now, about that window latch. I can fix it properly, make it stronger than before, and I can check your door while I'm at it." "I couldn't ask you to do that," Thea protested. "You didn't ask. I offered." He rose, setting his cup aside. "I've got some tools with my gear at the livery. I'll be back in an hour if that suits you." Thea hesitated. Having a strange man working on her home would only feed the rumors, but the alternative, another night with unsecured windows, was unthinkable. "Yes," she decided. "That would be fine. Thank you." Ethan nodded and picked up his hat. "Lock this door behind me, Thea. I'll knock 3 times when I return so you know it's me." After he left, Thea stood by the closed door for a long moment, wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake trusting a stranger. But something about Ethan Thornton's straightforward manner reassured her. He had believed her when no one else would. True to his word, Ethan returned an hour later with a small tool bag. He worked efficiently, replacing the broken latch with a sturdier mechanism of his own design. As he worked, he told Thea about his life, how he'd come west as a young man looking for adventure, how he'd worked as a ranch hand, a guide, and occasionally a bounty hunter. He'd seen most of the territories and had stories about each that made Thea laugh despite her anxiety. "What brings you to Cottonwood Creek?" she asked as he finished with the window and moved to reinforce her door. Ethan's expression sobered. "I'm tracking someone, a man who's been attacking lone homesteads between here and Tucson." Thea's heart skipped. "You think it could be the same man who broke in here?" "It's possible," Ethan admitted. "The attacks have been getting bolder, started with isolated ranches, now moving closer to towns." "Why hasn't anyone heard about this?" Ethan's hand stilled on the doorframe. "Because the victims have all been women living alone, and no one's been believing them either." A chill ran down Thea's spine. "What does he want? Robbery?" "No," Ethan said grimly. "He doesn't take anything, and so far, all the women have managed to fight him off before." He trailed off, unwilling to voice the implication. "Before he could assault them," Thea finished quietly. Ethan nodded, resuming his work. "The first victim was my sister. She lives on a small ranch outside of Tucson with her children. Her husband died last year. This man broke into her home 3 months ago. She fought him off with a fireplace poker, but no one believed her story either. Said she was just a nervous widow, imagining things." "So you're hunting him," Thea said, understanding dawning. "I am," Ethan confirmed. "Been following his trail north. You're the 5th woman with the same story and the same wounds." He gestured to her bandaged arm. "May I see?" hesitantly. Thea unwrapped the bandage. The 3 parallel gashes were angry and red against her pale skin, the stitches stark black threads pulling the flesh together. Ethan's expression hardened as he looked at the wounds. Just like the others, he wears some kind of claw weapon on his hand, makes the wounds look like an animal attack. Which is why no one believes it was a person, Thea realized. Exactly. Ethan gently rewrapped her arm. I think he enjoys it, not just the attacks, but knowing his victims won't be believed. It's another form of violence. Thea shivered, wrapping her arms around herself. What do we do now? I'll stay in town, Ethan decided. Keep watch on your cabin at night. He might come back, especially if he knows you survived and reported him. You'd do that for me? Thea asked, surprised. Ethan's green eyes met hers. I couldn't protect my sister, but I can try to protect you and catch this monster before he hurts anyone else. That night, true to his word, Ethan set up watch from the shadows of a nearby tree, with a clear view of Thea's cabin. Inside, despite the reinforced windows and door, Thea couldn't sleep. Every creak and whisper of wind made her heart race. Finally, near dawn, exhaustion claimed her. She woke to bright sunlight and the smell of coffee. For a moment, disoriented, she thought she was back in Boston. Then reality returned, and she sat up quickly, reaching for the small Derringer pistol she kept beneath her pillow. It's just me, came Ethan's voice from near the stove. Hope you don't mind. You were sleeping so soundly, I didn't want to wake you. Thea blinked at him, then at the bright sunlight streaming through her windows. What time is it? Nearly 9, Ethan replied, pouring coffee into a cup. Thought you might need the rest. 9. Thea scrambled out of bed, still fully dressed from the night before. I'm supposed to be at the school. The children, already taken care of, Ethan assured her, offering the coffee. I stopped by and told Mrs. Peterson you were unwell. She's handling the class today. Thea accepted the cup, frowning slightly. Mrs. Peterson retired last year. She's the one I replaced. Ethan's expression changed subtly. That's odd. The woman at the school said she was Mrs. Peterson. A cold feeling settled in Thea's stomach. What did she look like? Older lady, gray hair, spectacles. Ethan's hand moved to his gun. Not Mrs. Peterson? No, Thea whispered. That's Mrs. Dempsey, my neighbor, the one who claimed she never heard anything the night I was attacked. Ethan moved to the window, peering out cautiously. Get your things, Thea. We're not staying here. Where are we going? She asked, already reaching for her small valise. Somewhere safe. I think your attacker has an accomplice. Within minutes, they were slipping out the back of Thea's cabin, making their way toward the livery where Ethan's horse was stabled. Thea's mind raced with questions, but she kept quiet, following Ethan's lead as they moved through the alleys of Cottonwood Creek. At the livery, the stable boy greeted them with a puzzled expression. Heading out, Mr. Thornton? Just taking the lady for a ride, Ethan replied easily. Her first time on a horse. The boy grinned. Well, Thunder's gentle enough. Best of luck, Miss Kinsley. Ethan saddled his horse, a magnificent black gelding, and helped Thea mount before swinging up behind her. They rode out of town at an unhurried pace, as if simply enjoying a morning ride. Only when the buildings of Cottonwood Creek had disappeared behind them did Ethan urge Thunder into a gallop. They rode hard for nearly an hour before Ethan finally slowed, guiding the horse into a small canyon where a stream provided water and cottonwood trees offered shade. He helped Thea dismount, steadying her as her legs wobbled beneath her. Are you all right? He asked, his hands lingering on her waist. Thea nodded, trying to ignore the warmth that spread through her at his touch. Just not used to riding. Where are we? About 10 miles northwest of Cottonwood Creek, Ethan replied, leading Thunder to the stream. There's an old line shack nearby that trappers use sometimes. We can stay there while I figure out our next move. Our next move? Thea echoed. Mr. Thornton, Ethan, I appreciate your help more than I can say, but I can't just disappear with you. I have a position, responsibilities. You have a man trying to kill you, Ethan interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. And now I believe he has help in town. Going back isn't safe. Thea sank onto a rock, the reality of her situation crashing down on her. Why me? Why any of us? Ethan crouched before her, taking her hands in his. I don't know, but I intend to find out, and to stop him. He looked at her intently, and Thea felt something shift between them, a connection that went beyond their shared purpose. His hands were rough with calluses, but they held hers with surprising gentleness. I won't let him hurt you again, Ethan promised softly. Thea found herself believing him, trusting him, despite knowing him for less than a day. Perhaps it was desperation, or perhaps it was something in those green eyes that spoke of a depth of character she rarely encountered. Thank you, she whispered. The line shack was small and dusty, but solid. It contained a single room with a stone fireplace, a narrow cot, a rough table with 2 chairs, and a few shelves of basic provisions left by previous occupants. Ethan busied himself checking that the chimney was clear while Thea swept out the worst of the dust. It's not much, Ethan apologized, but it's defensible, and no one in town knows about it. It's fine, Thea assured him. After last night, anywhere feels safe as long as... She trailed off, embarrassed by what she'd been about to say. As long as what? Ethan prompted, pausing in his task. Thea's cheeks flushed. As long as you're here, she admitted quietly. Ethan's expression softened. I'm not going anywhere, Thea. As dusk fell, Ethan built a small fire in the fireplace, careful to keep it small so the smoke wouldn't draw attention. They shared a simple meal of beans and hardtack from the provisions, sitting close together at the small table. Tell me about Boston, Ethan said. What made you leave? Thea smiled wistfully. It wasn't so much leaving Boston as it was finding somewhere I could be my own person. My father is a banker, very proper, very controlling. He had my life planned out, which social events I would attend, which suitable young man I would marry, which charities I would support as a proper society wife. And that wasn't what you wanted? No, Thea replied. I wanted to teach, to make a difference. When I saw the advertisement for a teacher needed in Arizona territory, it seemed like the perfect escape. Brave of you, Ethan commented. Not many would venture so far alone. What about you? Thea asked. You mentioned a sister in Tucson. Do you have other family? A shadow passed over Ethan's face. Parents are gone. It's just me and Catherine now. And her children. I'm sorry, Thea said softly. Ethan shrugged. It's the way of things out here. Life is harder, shorter often. Makes you appreciate the good moments more. Their eyes met across the table, and for a moment, neither spoke. The firelight cast a warm glow on Ethan's features, softening the hard lines of his face. Thea found herself wondering what it would be like to touch that scar on his jaw, to feel the roughness of his stubble beneath her fingers. The moment was broken by a sound outside the distant whinny of a horse that wasn't thunder. Ethan was on his feet in an instant, his hand on his revolver. Stay here, he whispered, moving to the window. Keep away from the light. Thea's heart hammered in her chest as Ethan peered cautiously through the grimy glass. After a tense moment, he relaxed slightly. Just a wild Mustang, he said, but we should be more careful. No fire tomorrow night. He turned back to her, and Thea couldn't hide the fear in her expression. Ethan crossed to her side, kneeling beside her chair. Hey, he said gently, we're safe here, I promise. Without thinking, Thea reached out, her fingers brushing against the scar on his jaw. Ethan went very still, his eyes never leaving hers. How did you get this? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Bar fight in Dodge City, he replied, a smile tugging at his lips. Not my proudest moment. Were you always this way? A protector? Ethan caught her hand, holding it against his face. No. I've been many things, Thea. Not all of them good. But right now, protecting you feels like the most important thing I've ever done. The intensity in his voice made her breath catch. She was acutely aware of his closeness, of the warmth of his skin beneath her palm, of the way his eyes darkened as they gazed into hers. Ethan, she murmured, unsure what she wanted to say. He released her hand and stood abruptly. You should take the cot. I'll keep watch. The moment shattered, leaving Thea confused and oddly bereft. You need to rest too. I'm used to going without sleep, he assured her. Been on trail drives where I stayed in the saddle for 3 days straight. One night's no hardship. Despite her protests, Ethan insisted, and eventually Thea curled up on the narrow cot while he settled in a chair by the window, his rifle across his lap. Though exhausted, sleep eluded her. She was too aware of his presence, of the danger that had driven them here, of the confusing feelings stirring within her. Dawn came with a soft rain pattering on the roof of the shack. Thea woke to find Ethan still at his post, his eyes alert despite the night's vigil. He smiled when he saw she was awake. "Sleep well?" he asked. "Better than I expected," she admitted, sitting up and smoothing her rumpled skirt. "Your turn now. I'll keep watch." Ethan shook his head. "I'm fine, but I need to go back to town." Alarm shot through Thea. "What? Why?" "To find out more about your neighbor, Mrs. Dempsey, and to see if I can learn anything about the man who attacked you. I can't catch him if I don't know who he is." "It's too dangerous," Thea protested. "No one in town knows I'm helping you?" Ethan reminded her. "As far as they know, I'm just passing through. I'll be careful." Thea wanted to argue further, but she knew he was right. They couldn't stay hidden forever, and they needed information. "Promise you'll come back before nightfall," she said finally. Ethan's expression softened. "I promise." After he'd gone, Thea busied herself making the shack more habitable. She washed in the stream, cleaned out the cupboards, and inventoried their meager supplies. The work kept her hands busy, but her mind continued to wander to Ethan, to his gentle hands, his intense gaze, the feeling of his skin beneath her fingers. It was foolish, she knew, to develop feelings for a man she'd just met, especially under these circumstances. Yet she couldn't deny the connection between them, a bond forged in danger, but growing into something more. The hours dragged by with agonizing slowness. Each sound outside made her reach for the small derringer Ethan had insisted she keep close. By mid-afternoon, dark clouds had gathered, and thunder rumbled in the distance. Thea paced the small confines of the shack, watching the path that led back to town. Finally, as the first heavy drops of rain began to fall, she spotted a rider approaching. Relief flooded through her as she recognized Ethan's broad shoulders and Thunder's distinctive gait. She rushed outside, heedless of the rain, as he dismounted. "You came back," she said, unable to keep the joy from her voice. Ethan's smile was tired but genuine. "I promised I would." He led Thunder to the lean, to beside the shack that served as a crude stable, quickly unsaddling and rubbing down the horse as the rain intensified. When they finally ducked into the shack, both were soaked. "Here," Thea said, handing Ethan a threadbare towel from the provisions. "You must be freezing." "I've been colder," he replied, but accepted the towel gratefully. "Found out some interesting things in town." Thea busied herself making coffee on the small stove, trying not to stare as Ethan removed his wet vest and rolled up his sleeves, revealing muscular forearms tanned by the sun. "What did you learn?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. Ethan accepted the cup of coffee with a nod of thanks. "Your Mrs. Dempsey has been in Cottonwood Creek for about 4 months, arrived just before you did. But here's the interesting part. She's not a widow like she claims. Sheriff got a telegram a while back asking about a woman matching her description. Seems she left a husband back in Colorado." Thea frowned. "That's odd, but I don't see how it connects to the attacks." "Neither did I, until I started asking around the saloon. Barkeep mentioned that Mrs. Dempsey receives regular visits from a man who comes to town every few weeks, stays a day or two, then leaves again." "My attacker?" Thea suggested. "Possibly. Description matches what little you saw, tall, strong build. And get this, he always wears gloves, even indoors, even in the heat." "To hide his claw weapon," Thea realized. Ethan nodded. "That's what I'm thinking, but there's more. I checked the sheriff's office while he was out on patrol. Found a wanted poster for a man named Samuel Dempsey, wanted in Colorado for the murder of 3 women. Thea's hand flew to her mouth. "You think Mrs. Dempsey is his wife? That she's helping him?" "It fits," Ethan said grimly. "She came here first, established herself as a respectable widow, then reported back to him about potential victims, women living alone, like you. But why? Why would she help him do such horrible things?" Ethan's expression darkened. "Some people are just twisted, Thea. They find each other, feed each other's darkness." A shiver ran through her that had nothing to do with her damp clothes. "What do we do now?" "We wait for him to come to us," Ethan said. "According to the barkeep, Dempsey usually arrives on the Friday stage. That's tomorrow." You want to use me as bait, Thea realized. Ethan reached across the table, taking her hand. No, I want to end this, but not at the risk of your safety. We'll set a trap, but you'll be well protected, I promise. The intensity in his eyes made her believe him. All right, she agreed. What's the plan? As the storm raged outside, they plotted together. Ethan would return to town in the morning, keeping watch on the stage depot. Once he confirmed Dempsey's arrival, he would follow him, hoping to catch him meeting with Mrs. Dempsey and gather enough evidence to convince the sheriff. And if the sheriff still doesn't believe us? Thea asked. Ethan's expression hardened. Then I'll deal with Dempsey myself. The implication was clear, and Thea found herself not objecting. If this man had murdered women, had tried to murder her, perhaps justice outside the law was the only kind available. As night fell and the storm continued, the temperature in the shack dropped. Ethan built a small fire, careful to keep it low so the smoke wouldn't be visible in the darkness. You should take the cot again, he said, but Thea shook her head. You need rest if you're going to town tomorrow. Besides, we could... She hesitated, then gathered her courage. We could share it, for warmth. Ethan stared at her, and Thea felt her cheeks flush. That wouldn't be proper, he said finally. Nothing about this situation is proper, Thea pointed out, and I trust you, Ethan. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. The cot was narrow, barely wide enough for two, but they managed. Thea lay with her back to Ethan's chest, his arm draped carefully over her waist. Despite the impropriety, she felt safe in his embrace, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing and the rain on the roof. Ethan, she whispered into the darkness. His voice was a rumble she could feel against her back. What will you do after this is over? After we catch Dempsey? There was a long pause before he answered. I hadn't thought that far ahead. Go back to Tucson, I suppose. Check on my sister. Oh. Thea couldn't keep the disappointment from her voice. Ethan's arm tightened slightly around her waist. What about you? Will you stay in Cottonwood Creek? I don't know, she admitted. I'm not sure I can, after everything that's happened. You could come to Tucson, he suggested, his voice careful, measured. School's there too. Thea's heart quickened. Is that an invitation, Mr. Thornton? She felt rather than heard his soft laugh. Maybe it is, Miss Kinsley. In the morning, they woke still entwined, Thea's head nestled against Ethan's shoulder, his arms holding her close. For a moment, neither moved, savoring the warmth and closeness before reality intruded. I should go, Ethan said finally, reluctantly releasing her. The stage arrives at noon. Thea sat up, suddenly anxious. Be careful. If Dempsey is as dangerous as you think, I've faced worse, Ethan assured her, though his eyes betrayed his concern. Stay here, keep the door barred. I'll be back by sunset. He hesitated, then leaned forward, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. For luck, he murmured. After he'd gone, Thea moved through the day in a haze of anxiety and anticipation. She tidied the already clean shack, inventoried their supplies again, and paced until she thought she might wear a path in the wooden floor. Every sound from outside made her heart race, her hand moving to the derringer at her waist. As the afternoon waned with no sign of Ethan, her anxiety grew. Had something gone wrong? Had Dempsey recognized him, realized he was being followed? The sun began to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Just as she was contemplating the unthinkable going to town herself to look for him, she heard hoofbeats approaching. Relief flooded through her as she peered through the window and recognized Ethan. But as he drew closer, she realized he wasn't alone. Another rider followed behind him, hands bound to the saddle horn. Thea unbarred the door, her derringer ready as Ethan dismounted, dragging his prisoner from the horse. Samuel Dempsey, Ethan announced, shoving the man toward the shack. Thought you might like to meet him properly in the light. Dempsey was a tall, broad-shouldered man, with a face that might have been handsome, if not for the cruelty that twisted his features. His right hand was encased in a strange leather glove that extended up his forearm. With metal claws protruding from the fingertips, the weapon he'd used on Thea and the others. You, Thea breathed, recognition flooding through her despite the brief glimpse she'd had during the attack. Dempsey sneered. Schoolteacher? Should have finished you when I had the chance. Ethan shoved him roughly into a chair, binding his ankles to the legs with rope. He won't be hurting anyone else. Sheriff's got his wife in custody, too. Caught them planning their next attack on the dressmaker's assistant this time. Relief made Thea's knees weak. The sheriff believed you? He did after I showed him these, Ethan said, holding up Dempsey's clawed glove. And after I mentioned the wanted poster, turns out he'd received it but never connected it to Mrs. Dempsey. She was using her maiden name here. Thea stared at the hideous weapon, her arm throbbing at the memory of those claws tearing into her flesh. Why? She asked Dempsey. Why do this? The man's laugh was cold, empty of humanity. Why not? Women alone shouldn't be alone. Makes them uppity, thinking they can live without a man. Disgust filled Thea. You're a monster. And you're a dead woman, Dempsey replied, his eyes cold. You think this is over? Margaret will get free. She always does. And she'll come for you. No, she won't, Ethan said calmly. Sheriff's already telegraphed the marshal in Tucson. They'll both hang for what they've done in Colorado, if not here. Dempsey lunged suddenly, the chair scraping against the floor as he tried to reach Thea. Ethan moved quickly, placing himself between them, his fist connecting with Dempsey's jaw in a blow that snapped the man's head back. Try that again, Ethan said softly, dangerously, and hanging will be the least of your worries. The look in his eyes must have convinced Dempsey, who subsided, glaring sullenly. We ride for Tucson at first light, Ethan told Thea. Sheriff's sending a deputy to meet us halfway. Dempsey and his wife will face justice there. That night, they took turns keeping watch over their prisoner. During her shift, Thea studied Dempsey as he dozed fitfully in his bonds. How could someone become so twisted, so filled with hatred? She couldn't fathom it. When Ethan relieved her near dawn, his hand lingered on her shoulder. Get some rest. Long ride ahead. Ethan, she said softly, covering his hand with hers. Thank you for believing me when no one else would. His eyes, tired but warm, met hers. Anyone with sense would have believed you. Thea. The journey to Tucson took 4 days. They met the deputy as arranged, transferring Dempsey to his custody, but continued on together. With each passing mile, Thea found herself both dreading and anticipating their arrival, dreading the end of their time alone together, yet eager to see if Ethan's suggestion about Tucson had been sincere. They spoke of many things during those days on the trail of their pasts, their hopes, their dreams. Thea told Ethan about her sheltered upbringing in Boston, about her dream of making a difference through education. Ethan shared stories of his years drifting across the territories, of the beauty and harshness of the land, of his sister and her children, whom he clearly adored. By the time Tucson appeared on the horizon, a golden glow in the afternoon sun, Thea knew she had fallen in love with this quiet, honorable man. But she had no idea if he felt the same. They rode directly to the marshal's office, where Dempsey was formally charged and imprisoned. The marshal, a grizzled man named Jenkins, listened to their testimony with growing anger. 5 women attacked, 3 murdered back in Colorado, he said, shaking his head. And this one, he nodded toward Thea. Nobody believed when she reported it. No one but Mr. Thornton, Thea confirmed. The marshal eyed Ethan appraisingly. Good work, son. Those women in Colorado, their families have been waiting a long time for justice. Ethan nodded, his expression somber. What about Mrs. Dempsey? Sheriff Howell was supposed to send her with another deputy. Arrived yesterday, Jenkins confirmed. Nasty piece of work, that one. Keeps insisting she's innocent, that her husband forced her. She lied, Thea said firmly. She helped him select his victims. She watched my home, reported my movements to him. Don't worry, Miss Kinsley, the marshal assured her. They'll both hang. Your testimony today ensures it. Outside the marshal's office, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across Tucson's dusty streets. Thea stood awkwardly beside Thunder, uncertain what came next. My sister's place is just outside of town, Ethan said, breaking the silence. She'd love to meet you. Hope fluttered in Thea's chest. I'd like that. They rode side by side as Ethan led the way to a small ranch nestled against the foothills. A woman with Ethan's green eyes and a boy of about 10 were waiting on the porch, having spotted their approach. Uncle Ethan, the boy called, racing down to meet them. Ethan dismounted, swinging the child up into his arms with a laugh. "James, you've grown a foot since I left." Catherine Thornton embraced her brother warmly, then turned curious eyes to Thea. "And who's this?" she asked, her smile welcoming. "Catherine, this is Miss Thea Kinsley," Ethan said, helping Thea dismount. "Thea, my sister Catherine." "The schoolteacher," Catherine said, understanding dawning in her eyes. "Ethan mentioned you in his letter. You're the one who was attacked, like me." Thea nodded. "Yes, your brother saved my life." Catherine's smile widened. "He's good at that, saving people." She linked her arm through Thea's. "Come inside. You must be exhausted after your journey, and I want to hear everything." The next few days passed in a pleasant haze. Catherine's home was warm and welcoming. Her children James and 6-year-old Lucy immediately adopting Thea as a beloved aunt. Catherine herself proved to be as kind and straightforward as her brother, and the two women quickly formed a friendship. The trial of the Dempseys was swift. With testimony from Thea, Ethan, and evidence from Colorado, the verdict was never in doubt. Both were sentenced to hang for their crimes. Thea felt no joy at the sentence, only relief that no other women would suffer at their hands. On the evening after the trial, Thea sat on the porch of Catherine's home, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. Ethan joined her, settling into the chair beside her. "Penny for your thoughts," he said softly. Thea smiled. "I was thinking about Cottonwood Creek, actually. Wondering if I should go back." "Do you want to go back?" She considered the question. "No," she admitted. "There's nothing for me there. But I need to teach. It's who I am." "Tucson has a school," Ethan pointed out. "Catherine mentioned they're looking for another teacher." Thea turned to look at him. "Are you suggesting I stay?" Ethan met her gaze steadily. "I'm suggesting more than that, Thea." Her heart skipped. "What exactly are you suggesting, Mr. Thornton?" "That you stay," he said, reaching for her hand. "Not just in Tucson, but with me. I know it's fast and maybe improper, but these past weeks, I've never felt for anyone what I feel for you." Joy bubbled up inside Thea. "I feel the same way," she whispered. Ethan's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "I don't have much to offer. Just a small piece of land near here that I've been working when I'm not on the trail. But I'm thinking of settling down, building something permanent." "That sounds wonderful," Thea said, squeezing his hand. "A home, a school nearby where I could teach." "A family someday," Ethan added, watching her carefully. "If you wanted that." Thea's eyes filled with happy tears. "I would want that very much." He leaned forward then, his lips meeting hers in a tender kiss that held both promise and passion. When they parted, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "I saw the marks," he murmured. "When no one else believed you, I knew you weren't lying. But I never expected to find my heart in the process." Thea smiled, cupping his scarred cheek in her palm. "Sometimes the greatest truths are found in the most unexpected places." 6 months later, Thea stood before her class in the Tucson schoolhouse, watching as the children bent over their slates. Through the window, she could see Ethan approaching on Thunder, right on time to walk her home to the small but sturdy house they had built together on his land. Their wedding had been simple but joyous, with Catherine and her children, the marshal and his wife, and a few new friends in attendance. Thea had written to her parents in Boston, expecting disapproval, but had been surprised to receive a warm letter of congratulation and a promise to visit in the spring. Life in the Arizona Territory was not easy, but it was rich and full. Ethan still rode as a guide occasionally, but more often worked their growing ranch. Thea taught during the week and helped with the ranch on weekends. In the evenings, they sat on their porch, watching the sunset and talking of their future together. The scars on Thea's arm had faded to thin white lines, a reminder of the terror that had brought them together but no longer held power over her. In their place was strength, the strength that came from being believed, from being loved, from finding home in the heart of another. As Ethan dismounted and waited patiently outside the schoolhouse, his green eyes finding hers through the window, Thea knew with absolute certainty that some marks never faded like the mark he had left on her heart, and she on his. And those were the marks that mattered most.